Welcome everyone to our post growth initiative Sunnyside chat. I am super excited about tonight's chat with brother Jason Chambers. He is someone that I admire, someone whose work I actually study just to make myself a better Black person in advertising per se, and also, as founder and chief creative officer of this organization, it's very important that that we all understand our history in regards to this industry that we're all in, and some still trying to get in, and some will be in very soon. But it's so very important to understand our history, especially in these times that we're living in right now, because to my beloved gifts, we can tell you but so much, but there's so much more history that even we as professionals, with between, I mean, like Gary has like 14 years experience, I have like 14 years experience, and all of us, but we're all under 20 years experience within the game. But there's so much we can gain from brother Jason Chambers. So that's why I wanted to invite him, because fun fact, brother Chambers, your book was actually a gift from my mom to me.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
when she kind of saw clearly that this is the path, and this is
Mhm.
what I want to do in regards to diversity, equity, inclusion, and culture. She was like, so she bought me the book, and I was like, but it's like a physical book. I like reading it on my iPad. So I have two copies of your book,
Mm.
one on my iPad and one physical copy book. But it's I definitely I started reading it and reading some more, and just there were so many correlations between what we're going through right now in the industry, and
Mhm.
what brothers like Gary and I have kind of been screaming and like yelling about, and all of a sudden some of those things are slowly coming into fruition, through just emergency almost.
Mhm.
So it's very hard for us to really kind of believe that this isn't performative and this is real.
Right.
I think it's very hard to, or another kind of analogy I use is trying to understand between the hype and the magic.
Mhm.
So that's why I definitely wanted you to meet all our beautiful faces and people that we have. I see you, James. I didn't forget about you, James. I see you, and I see you, Andrew and Ernest too. But I wanted to just bring you here. I obviously, there's some questions that I want to ask you, because I think they can really help us out as professionals growing in this
Mhm.
field, which I feel is very important, but like without the historical context. And that's something that you are like a savant in. And yes, I said it. And if anyone wants to fight me over it, they can fight me over it. I've called you a savant. That's what it is. Kenny said so. So just to give everyone a little bit of background information on brother Chambers, I'm going to read a little bit of his bio, because if you think my bio is long, his bio is 10 times longer. So I cut it down a little bit. So let me just go into it really quick for you all. So brother Jason P. Chambers is an associate professor in the Department of Advertising at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. He currently teaches courses on advertising history, the incorporation of race and ethnicity in advertising campaigns, and the foundations of advertising philosophy. A graduate of Ohio State University, Dr. Chambers has presented his research into African-American consumer market both nationally and internationally. His work has been published in books and both academic and trade journals in the United States, Asia, and Europe. So he got that global game, y'all. He's appeared on the History Channel discussing advertising history, and his opinions have been sought on by a variety of media sources, including at Advertising Age, Adweek, 100 Roses been there, Forbes, Black Enterprise, the New York Times, National Public Radio, and Newsweek. In addition, he has consulted with nonprofit organizations, Fortune 100 companies, as well as advertising agencies on matters of African American history, diversity, stereotyping, and consumer issues. The University of Pennsylvania Press published his first book, Madison Avenue and the Color Line, African Americans in the Advertising Industry, in early 2008. So that was the book that I was telling you that my mama bought me. His His current project is a book-length biography of advertising legend Thomas J. Burrell. This book is currently under contract with the University of Illinois Press. So everyone, give a round of applause. You can unmute your mics and give Brother Jason a round of applause. Welcome to 100 Rows from Concrete. Welcome to the Sunnyside Chats. And let's just get it going. So my first question for you, Brother Chambers, is just how are you holding up just in these crazy times that we're living in right now? How are you holding up?
You know, pretty well. I mean, all things considered. I mean, our family has been blessed not to actually be terribly negatively impacted by the pandemic, by COVID. My sister actually had COVID, but she made her way through it. So, beyond that, it's just a matter of keeping up with our own mental health, keeping up with, the family. Everybody's life is different. Certainly in my house, my kids go to school, one at the dining room table, one at the kitchen table, and school equals what, 2 hours and 45 minutes, and then it's all independent work. So about as well as can be expected, right? I don't look a gift horse in the mouth that our family hasn't been, more negatively impacted. Fortunately, everybody in our family has been taking it very seriously, and we've all been doing as well as we can in terms of inquiring after one another. My wife is excellent at that. She's a child psychologist by training, so she's constantly inquiring, how are you doing, right? And vice versa, me to her. So as well as can be expected, right? As well as can be expected with the times that we're living in, whether it's the pandemic, political, economic, what have you, right? I mean, we can go on and on about that.
Yeah. How are you personally, like, mentally managing it? Just like self-care, like, what are you doing?
Trying as best I can to compartmentalize, right? Because when your work and your leisure are all combined, and you really don't feel like the things that you might normally do to relieve some of the stress and relieve some of the pressure, those things aren't available to you because places are closed. You can't go out somewhere and get a drink. You can't kind of change your environment. So just trying to compartmentalize as best I can, right? So for example, I'm sitting in my home office right now. Okay, if it's not the work day or work time, for example, I try not to come in here. Right. I try not to do anything in here but work versus, if I was going to my office on campus, well, this room might be used, utilized for something else. And maybe I'll play the video games in here or something like that. But now I kind of try to compartmentalize things and spaces and time, just to kind of be aware, because I noted earlier this year, maybe like a lot of us, I was realizing I didn't actually know what day it was. Right. What day of the week it even was, like, especially during the summer, because so much of our ordinary kind of routines of life had been disrupted. I remember there was a couple of times this summer, my wife and I kind of looked at each other and we were like, well, what day of the week is it? Because we were working from home and things of that nature. And I wasn't teaching classes at that time. And it's like, is it Wednesday? No, I think it's Thursday. No, it can't be Thursday. No, it's Wednesday. And it turns out it's Friday or something like that. So yeah. And because the markers of the week are gone, you're not going to church on Sunday because church is closed, right? Yeah. So you go to church at the TV, but it's not the same as the regular Sunday experience or Saturday breakfast or whatever the case may be.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, this year has just been, it's I call it Groundhog's Day. It's like but it's like a really bad Groundhog's Day, because at least like in Groundhog's Day, Bill Murray like tried to learn a new skill every day and try to get him through like those Groundhog's Day. So with the recent events of 2020, what has been, in your opinion, in how the industry has kind of now all of a sudden reawakened the diversity crisis?
The thing about the advertising industry is, one, I would say, and I talked about this a bit in my book, and I've talked about it many times since then, is really from about 1963, 64-ish on, right up to our own present time. The industry goes through reckonings with race and ethnicity approximately every 8 to 12 years, right? It's cyclical. It really is. And so my question is always, or my surprise isn't that the advertising industry kind of awakens. My concern is, does it stay awake? right? Does it stay woke, if you will, if we can continue with the parlance of our times? Because we've seen it kind of awakened, if you will, before 1991, 92, with around the Rodney King crisis, about 2000, early 2000, 2001, then again in 2008, 2006-ish, 2008-ish. And then here we are, and it's usually driven, almost always driven by something external to the industry that causes this kind of reckoning, as people in the industry say, well, what about us, right? What about our own role in this? So the awakening itself is not surprising because of the things that it's been connected to, but it really is a question of how long, as an industry, does it stay awake? And it's certainly, industries are made up of agencies, and agencies are made up of people, but that's really how I've taken to think about it, is how long does it kind of stay awakened?
Yeah, that's been my worry too, because even as we sit here right now, it's November, and the outcry has died down. Like
A lot.
June, June and July, it was, it was almost, I don't know, it was like an uprising. But as August came, September got quieter, October got even quieter, and now like we're in this, on this very low plane of like, okay, so is anything still being done, or does this even matter anymore? Because it gets so quiet. Granted, like, there are definitely sections of groups like 100 Rows of Concrete, definitely other groups that are having talks about it, and there's behind the scenes work that some people are doing, but the loudness of it has definitely died down a whole lot, at least from my perspective. So my next question I have for you is, could you describe your experience writing on Madison Avenue and the Color Line? Also, was there anything that stood out to you that is still occurring right now in the advertising industry?
Sure. It was a project that started when I was in graduate school. All of my degrees are in history. When I was at I have to say the Ohio State University, because the university went through a lawsuit to put that "the" there to distinguish ourselves. So the Ohio State University. When I was at the Ohio State University, I say that tongue in cheek, of course. It started as a project and a course on consumer culture. And I had a really short, sharp professor rather. And so the course was on the history of consumerism, consumer culture in the United States. And so I wanted to do something. My goal was to develop a project that I always said that people beyond the academy would want to hear about, that I wanted the opportunity in my career to talk to more than just academics, more than just PhDs. I wanted the opportunity to develop subject matter that would allow me to talk to people, to talk and have an impact on industry and the like. And so that led me to I first started studying African-American entrepreneurs. And then as I kind of narrowed that down into studying African-American entrepreneurs, particularly in advertising, because there had been some at that time, here we're talking about the mid 1990s, there had been work done on, the images of African Americans in advertising. Books like Aunt Jemima, Uncle Ben, and Rastus, talking about Aunt Jemima, talking about the cream of wheat chef, talking about Uncle Ben, who's now been retired, right? They're set to the side. So those kinds of books had been out there, the imagery of African Americans in advertising. And so I wanted a unique take. I wanted a unique approach. And there just wasn't anything on African Americans as entrepreneurs and employees really within the advertising industry. And my take was, or my approach was, African Americans have been active in virtually every area of life that you can think of. That it hasn't been written about isn't because it doesn't exist. It's just that nobody's taken the time to go through the research and the resources to find out what our participation was actually like. And if we don't have a visible presence in an industry or an area of life, there's probably a really good story behind that, right? And so that led me to kind of digging into the archival research and resources, because I said, you know what? And I started with saying, excuse me, every time I stick these back in my ears, it causes my music program to come on, because the wireless headphones have controls when you touch them. So I said, I want to know the earliest instance in which I can find an African American operating however they defined it, operating an advertising agency, right? And that can be a very loose term, but they called themselves specifically operating an advertising agency. And then I want to carry the story forward from there. And that took me back to the 19 teens in Chicago. And then I carried the story forward from there through archival research, through interview research, oral interviews and the like. And so that's what led me to the writing of that particular text. And I think the thing that stood out and surprised me, I shouldn't say surprised, because I've never been surprised at the resilience of our people, right? But what surprised me is how many times people kept coming back to this industry, kept coming back to the advertising industry, kept pushing for opportunity, kept pushing for the chance to be more than workaday world types, to become actual advertising professionals, and also how they look to use advertising, right? Look to use advertising to help rehabilitate or rebuild the image of African Americans, both to the broader population, but also to present a stronger and more clear and better, more positive image of African Americans to themselves. Because advertising is just, at a base level, it's just communication, right? It's a very ubiquitous form of communication. It surrounds us. And so as a form of communication, as a potential tool of image building, how early on and how long African Americans have looked to use advertising as a source and as a resource, certainly to make money and certainly to sell products, but also then to rehabilitate the image or improve the image or strengthen or make more positive the image of African Americans in the United States.
Interesting. And that was definitely something that rang true, definitely in the well, the book is very long, but in the beginning of the book, and definitely when you were talking about like resources and research, and this is one thing that I kind of tell whether it's young people that I work with or some of my clients, is that just the ton of research that you talked about in the book about African-American spending just to convince brands to advertise to African. I mean, it was literally decades upon decades of studies of the Black dollar. And it was just like, Jesus Christ, does it take that long to understand that we spend money? Like that part alone just blew my mind. It absolutely blew my mind.
Well, and I'll tell you, I had a brother tell me, older brother, he told me, I said, one of the questions I always ask my interviewees was, what surprised you in your advertising career, especially as you were getting into it as a young man? Now, this is a person who by that time had been in the advertising industry many decades. And so we were talking about his earlier years or what he'd really learned over the course of his career. And you were talking about money a moment ago. And he said, his words, he said, the thing that surprised me was I always thought the white man would choose the money. He said, and that's just not true. He said, race and relationships will often trump the better idea, the better agency, the better campaign. They won't always choose the money. You can't rely on that. And I thought that was an interesting thing because, growing up in the United States, you think that capitalism trumps everything. Wherever I can make the most money, I believe will be the choice that I will make. And he said, that's just not true. He said, not in my experience, it's not, because we got passed over many times where we got told, outside the room before the decision was announced, yeah, you guys' campaign is better. And he was speaking from the perspective of having worked at a Black agency and then gone on to found his own Black agency. We got told, yeah, you were better, but we're not going with you. Yeah, your campaign is equal or better, but no, we can't pay you the same thing that we pay the other agency, right? And that probably was one of the most surprising things, is because, again, you think that capitalism and the most money always wins, and that's not the case, right? Wow. Advertising is very much as such an ultimately subjective business, it's also very much a relationships business, right?
Interesting.
So I think that was very surprising to me. And I think you were talking about research a moment ago, I was told over the course of doing my book that archival sources didn't exist for me to actually do it, right? And I refuse to believe that. I said, I don't believe that they don't exist. I don't believe that this material doesn't exist. I don't believe that these letters and the things that historians use to craft books, I think that they exist. I just think it's a factor of nobody's ever found them. Nobody's taken the time to look. Nobody's been interested, what have you. And so I found them, and that I located them. And that was very important to me, because again, our story is there. We just have to, we just have to pull it out of the dustbins of history, as we historians like to say.
Wow. So as an entity that's based in connecting, collaborating, and growing, whether it's through our growth initiative, through our mentors, through our growth initiative, through its all the other amazing things that we do as an organization, my next question to you is, what do we need to do? What do we need to do as a people, as a group, to not kind of repeat some of the errors of those in the 70s, the 60s, even the 50s, that the few that were in the industry even back then? Like, what do we do to not repeat some of the mistakes that were probably made back then?
I think one is to build the strength of the organization in the organization itself, rather than in people, right? The organization has to be strong enough to stand regardless of the changes in leadership, because people's lives change. Our ability to spend time on a thing outside of our work time, those things get constrained. And so whereas perhaps once I was able to lead organization X when I was a younger man or without children or whatever the case may be, so I can stay out from home till 10, 11 o'clock at night, doing first my day job and then my organizational work after. Well, if that changes and the strength of our effort, the strength of our movement, the strength of our group was based in a person, well, then when that person leaves, then ultimately the organization doesn't last very long. And that you can see replicated time and again over the course of the history of this, from about, again, the late 1960s onward to our own present time. Organizations emerge, make a bit of a splash, and then disappear. And you kind of research why did it disappear or why did it stop? Well, a person moved, right? And that, I think, is a mistake not to be repeated, right? Build an organization that can outlast or exist without specific people driving it. Because those people their lives will inevitably change. I'll move from New York to LA or Chicago or Richmond or whatever else, and then the organization disappears or declines. And I would also say, the importance of commitment from external partners, right? And not just verbal commitment, but specific long-range financial commitment, insofar as such a thing can be established. Well, okay, if you make an agreement with somebody and they say it's important. Okay, well, why don't you commit X dollars to us for at least 5 years? Well, five years is too long. Well, 5 years is going to be what we need, at a minimum, right? If you're serious, I mean, it's like anything else in life or an organization. What people are serious about, they put their money behind. And if they're not, then you're not actually serious about it. Not really. Donating some stationery and a few pens is not a commitment. If you want to pull out a pen, pull out your checkbook while you're at it. Force external groups, entities, partners, agencies. Man, you've got to commit financially, and whether that finance is measured in job opportunities or financial support for the organization, you have to commit. If the challenge of diversity and inclusion were going to be solved, addressed adequately, it would have been so in the past. If you think about it, from the late 1960s to now, that's 50 years, right? Early 1960s, when the advertising industry first starts to experience significant pressure from the outside, okay, make that 60 years in the past. The advertising industry as an industry really doesn't emerge in the form that we know it to be today, something that we might recognize, agency structures looking like what we might recognize today, having an art department, a copy department, maybe a research or a traffic department. Some of the structures that we would recognize as part of agencies today, that doesn't really emerge significantly until about the turn of the 19th to the 20th century. Yeah, there were agencies prior to that, of course. So as an industry, you're only talking about an industry that's about 120 years old, if that, right? For half of its existence, it's been dealing at some level with issues of race. If we were going to be able to solve it with just, programs and nice talking tos and the occasional conference, somewhere over the 50% of its existence, it would have solved it. It would have addressed it, right? But ultimately, in a satisfactory manner, it actually hasn't. So for half of your existence, you've been unable to deal with this, unable to solve it adequately.
Yeah.
That's unacceptable.
It's beyond unacceptable, and they've done it absolutely horribly. So what can we as marketers, as change makers, how can we make impactful change in this new world of working and in advertising? Because even when people are able to go back into the office, everyone will be changed, right? From this last, I don't know, 8 to 10 months, basically the whole year. So how do we kind of continue the fight into this new world of working and advertising? How would we do that?
I think you continue to push, right? You continue to push in the ways that are available to you. The unique thing about this moment now is organizations have the ability to maintain themselves at a very low investment cost. They're able to maintain themselves without the presence or the need for specific gatekeepers, for example. So if we think about the time period that I was talking about earlier, so from the 1970s onwards, so 70s, 80s, 90s, on to the early 21st century, a huge thing that we have now that they didn't have then was the simplicity of what we're doing right now, the ability to conference, the ability to interface, the ability to keep a subject alive, a topic alive, an organization alive without physical presence, right? Without a conference where we all have to get to Atlanta to talk about these things, or we all have to fly to Las Vegas to talk about these things, or we all have to organize ourselves to be in the presence of some speaker because we don't have the ability to get it out in any other way. So utilizing the resources and the tools that are available now to maintain organization, but also to do so without the need for the visibility, and I sometimes say approval, tacit approval, to maintain organization, pressure, effort, and fight without advertising age being any the wiser, or advertising week, or the New York Times, or some other gatekeeper media source saying, hey, people, turn your attention to this group or this organization or this speaker or this conference because it appears in the pages of one of our advertising trade journals. Let the organization and drive the organization forward through the tools that are accessible to you, right? And maintain the pressure, the organization, and the network that way. Prior to this, an organization had to, some cases had to incorporate or, stationary or organize conference or organize speaker, get everybody together. You don't have to do that now. We can say everybody from coast to coast, get on Zoom at 7 o'clock. And we're going to talk about this, and we're going to make serious headway on an issue, a problem, or a challenge, and nobody has to go anywhere except, in front of their computer. So use that, right? And be willing to do so without public visibility.
Interesting. So one thing, and shout out to my brother Alex, I see you. One thing me and my brother Alex talk about a lot is there are people within the industry that sometimes feel like they don't know how to kind of voice how to voice the change. So sometimes they feel voiceless. How do we empower the voiceless to make systemic change?
That's a challenging question because every organization isn't ready for it. Every organization, for example, that says it wants change, when the actual change is coming, or they see what the actual change looks like or feels like, right? You get that immediate pushback. You get that immediate, whether it's explicitly or implicitly said, no, don't say that. No, don't talk about that. No, that's not really the way that we do things here. Well, wait a minute. I thought you said that you wanted change. I thought that you said you wanted diversity. Well, if you want diversity by its very definition says that things don't stay the same. They become more diverse. So, you said you want to change by saying diversity, but now you're telling me that you don't.
Mm.
That's where the importance of a person's network comes in, right? That's where the importance of having spaces where people can come, and if I can't express it there, I can express it, in a group like 100 Roses, or in another organization, or another structure that then can help me either figure out ways to change the space that I'm in, or figure out a way to help me move somewhere else, somewhere that is more welcoming, because quite honestly, every space can't be changed.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Every space isn't worth the effort of changing.
Wow. Very, very true. I learned that definitely the hard way. So in learning it the hard way, one big problem that I think I saw a lot was the whole, like, yeah, we want change, but we don't want that kind of change, right?
Exactly.
So it all came down to like leadership and like really where their heads were their heads, excuse my language, were they up their ass, or like were their heads and hearts actually in the right place? So I often found myself, or found out that, oh, well, the work that Kenny's doing, that's not our brand. And I'm like, really? So I'm making you look less racist, but it's not on your brand. So is your brand racist? So it's a very, very, very interesting place to be. So what would you tell the leaders of these different organizations about the value of diverse talent in regard to the research that you've done?
One, I would say two things to them. One, in terms of employment, I would tell them to mind the middle, right? Mind the middle and the early stages. And all I simply mean by that, I'm extending this from a point that you were making a moment ago, is most people enter and leave advertising before they come anywhere near the C-suite, right? Before they come anywhere near a major level of management. Most people who leave within the first 5 to 7 years, right? If they even make it to 5. They don't hit those levels. And so and I was speaking at another conference with another gentleman from advertising, whose name escapes me. He said, where I caught hell wasn't from the C-suite, it was from the middle. It was from the mid-level managers. So the CEO, FO, CCO, IOTO, the whole bit, yeah, they bought in, but I didn't work with them, right? The people that I worked with wouldn't give me assignments. The people that I worked with would have a meeting and not tell me it was being held. So I caught hell from the middle, right? So first I would say mind the middle. But secondly, it gets said repeatedly, but it remains true. The audience that you're speaking to is diverse, and the range of perspectives that comes from the diversity of age, education, geography, race, sexual orientation, the diversity of life experiences, the diversity of interests, all of those things that if we put them into a creative space, especially, and we offer people the range, the latitude to express their genuine selves and their authentic selves in this creative space, then the ideas that come out will be so wonderfully unique. They'll be so different from the staid and the traditional advertising approaches that we see repeated ad nauseum, that we will see, I believe, a similar kind of flowering of creativity that we saw back in the 1960s, when the industry finally opened up itself greatly to white ethnics, right? Greeks and Italians, Poles, Jewish persons. The flowering of creativity was tied into that ethnic diversity that was brought to the industry in the 1960s. So if you can bring that now again in these spaces, I think that you'll see a similar wonderful expression of advertising creativity that'll draw the eyeballs of consumers from around the world. Unfortunately, too often, agencies say they want that. Even worse, clients say they want it, and they actually, we wanted creative, but not that creative, right? We wanted unique, but not that unique, because what they lack is the ability to properly evaluate the creative output of the diverse groups that they say they wanted. Well, you wanted diverse groups, but who you're having evaluate the output is anything but diverse. Well, those things don't go together. They don't go together.
If y'all want to unmute to clap that one up, please do. Can the church say amen? Please do. So, oh my God, what a great answer. So one thing you talked about was definitely that, like people of color leave before they even get to the C-suite. So one thing that we're seeing right now, and I'm getting extra spicy, y'all know I get extra spicy, roses and growth initiative people. So one way that I've seen the industry kind of fast track to the C-suite now is by creating these chief diversity officer roles, right? That's a quick way to get someone there. But the thing is, since it's such a hot job, and that's the only way to get us there. So we just have to mind about the colored folks, and then we can have a seat at the table. What are your thoughts about the chief diversity officer job being the hot job right now? What are your thoughts about that? And everybody, turn up your earphones really loud on this.
You used the phrase performative earlier, and the word performative earlier. My question for the CDO positions is it diversity? Is it a real opportunity, or is it a title? Because here's the thing that I would ask. I did an interview a few months ago now with Bloomberg. And they asked me what it was on this topic of the CDOs. And they asked me what I would ask some of the chief executive officers and the company presidents that were advocating for these kinds of positions. And I said two things. I said, one, I would ask them to be candid. So I'd have to ask them this privately, but I would ask them to be candid. And one, I would ask them to define what they wanted from a CDO, right? Because most people, it's not a position that we educate people on in business schools, right? If you go and look at a business school curriculum, of the like, they get training on finance and accounting and logistics and all technology. And they get training on what these roles will mean in an organization, what they bring to the organization, how they might fit into an organizational chart. Right. That's why we see, internet startups, for example, where it's like two people, one of whom has named themselves the CEO. Well, there's only two people here, but what they've been trained in is, well, if you've got an organization and somebody has to be the boss, well, that somebody has to be labeled the CEO, right? And whoever keeps the computers, well, they're the chief information officer or chief technical officer. But the CDO, we don't educate people at the college level, at the business level, on what this position should actually mean. And so too often when you review an organizational chart, for example, you see organizational chart for a group or a business, you see CDO and you look and there's no lines to it and there's no lines from it. Wait a minute, this is a chief position, but it seems to exist on an island. Okay, so that would be the first question, is what do you expect this entity to bring to your organization? You have to define it. If you can't define it before you hire this person, then how in the hell are they supposed to come in here and define it for you for your organization? I'm coming from the outside. And so you say, well, come in and tell us what the CDO should do. Well, shit, man, if you can't tell me, then why are you hiring me? Because you probably know what your chief information officer should do. Your chief security officer should do. But you don't know what your CDO should do, but you know that you should have one. So you hire one, but you don't know what to do with them. And if you don't know what to do with them, then how is anybody else in your organization supposed to know what to do with them? What are their responsibilities? What are they supposed to do? So I like the position. I support the position. Right? Because I think you have to have somebody whose responsibility it is that this is the thing that they do. But the question for me is always, how have you empowered this person to A, do what they do, but B, tell you where your organization fully and completely needs to change? So if the chief information officer came in and said, you know what, folks, we need to switch from Macs to PCs. Well, okay, man, the chief information officer said it. We're to get rid of all the Dells and we're all getting MacBooks. You would take that person, you would empower that person to make that type of organizational level decision. Does the CDO have that same level of influence, power, and control? If not, then what you've got is some type of officer, but do they have that same level of power, influence, and control as others in the C-suite? If not, then you have set that person up to fail, right? You've set them up to fail. And then what happens, what pisses me off is they say, well, we tried. It's like hiring Black folks. Well, we hired a couple a few years ago and it didn't work out. Oh, well, really, right? There's only like 50 million of us in the country. Right. So there's only tens of thousands who could work in an agency. Well, but you tried a couple. Oh, OK. Well, I guess problem solved then. So that to me is what happens with the CDO's role. How are you empowering them? How are you paying them as well? Right. Because that's the other thing that we see. Right. You see CEOs making 500,000. Everybody else in the C-suite's making 500,000 plus. Well, what are you paying your CDO? Well, they make 150. Well, what? Well, then how valuable are they? You can't hire somebody and by the very mechanism and means that you hire them and pay them, demonstrate to everybody else in the organization, this is a joke and we're not really serious. If you do, the results that you should expect to get will be negligible at best. Right. So I'm sorry, I'm soapboxing here.
No,
but
we wanted that spice. We wanted that spice. we wanted that spice. It got super spicy. That's what we're here for. We're all about the ingredients. So
well,
yeah,
we sit in a lot of places and spaces. You know, things become the hot topic of the moment, and then you realize and you learn that unfortunately people either A, don't know what they're asking for, don't know what they mean, can't define it for themselves, or B, just aren't that serious. And so I feel for people that get put in those positions, and we all have to earn a living. So I get it, but I feel for people that get put in those positions and they get told you're going to have these opportunities to make significant change. And then you're told, well, yeah, but not that kind of change. And so what you wind up doing is you wind up holding organizing workshops or something of that before you get frustrated and just move on to something else, because talented people can always just choose to do something else.
100%. I mean, I see it every day in the work that I do when I'm brought in to kind of almost mentor people newly in these roles, whether they're CDOs or directors of diversities or diversity managers, whatever the case may be, because the people that I coach and the people that I kind of share these strategies with, they're the first of their kind at their agency. So it's very interesting to spend time with them, and I'm glad that there's a lane for me to do that, because if they didn't bring me in, this woman or man would be set up to fail, like you said earlier. So it's kind of incredible that this job has kind of come onto the scene, but like you said before, there is no formal type of training for this particular role. Like, you can go to Miami Ad School to be a creative. You can go to Miami Ad School to even be a strategist. You can go to Baruch College or City College and learn advertising, marketing, media, and PR. But there's not really. Maybe I should just start a school to teach people how to be diversity CDOs or something like that. Maybe I'll do that.
But you're on to something there, because if you were asked to tell somebody, or you went to a business program and you just got a group of professors together, for example, and you said, okay, tell me the course, the professional course that you think a person should follow, the professional track that you think a person should follow if the ultimate goal of that individual is to become a CEO. Well, they would be able to tell you, well, you should maybe, go to an organization that allows you to specialize in X or in Y or in Z, and then that will enable you to gain the experience that you need to track to become, junior vice president, senior vice president, on up the line to see. They could lay out the path for you. It's akin to when I was in the military. They always told us, I was in the Army, and this was very long range thinking, but they were like, if you ever want to become one of the Joint Chiefs of the Army, you ever want to become a general of the Army, you got to come through the infantry, because at that point, everybody that made it up to that level at some point had spent time in the infantry. They could lay out the path for you, what you should experience, what you should learn, what you should study. CDOs very often come to it from outside that work. We don't have that training. And so just as an organization may not be able to tell a person what they want them to do, a CDO may have very limited ideas of what they should be doing. Right?
Facts. So I know we're running a little bit, we're running out of time a little bit. So as someone that teaches and writes on the collegiate level, and some of our gifts that we have on the call today, where they're not gifts anymore, they're grown because they graduated from growth. So now they're in the alumni association called Grown. We love them all very, very much. What can colleges and universities do to better prepare this next generation of Black and brown talent for the advertising industry?
I think number one, we've got to do better at not being a found major. That is one of the biggest challenges that we have. Is advertising is has a wonderfully visible product, right? Advertisements, but the visibility of the industry is still woefully low. Right. I liken it to, even people who say they hate advertising can name a favorite advertisement. Well, I hate advertising, but this one made me laugh, or this one made me cry, or whatever the case may be. This one reminded me of my dog, whatever. So even people who hate it can name an advertisement. Why? Because it surrounds us. We all see it. Okay, now name for me an advertising agency. Name for me, can you describe to me the process of how what you just say you love, how that such a thing got created? And most people can't. It's an invisible industry, right? People drive cars. We know that General Motors and Ford, Toyota and Honda, we know that they exist, right? People, put their money into banks, and we know Citigroup and all of that. Wells Fargo, we know that they exist, but the advertising industry is a little bit different. And so the challenge for us is the visibility of the industry and being found by students, especially being found by students of color, a number of whom are still very much first generation students, and students especially that come from that kind of background want to major in something where they can see definitive job, right? Definitive, significant income to start off. So the challenge for us is in recruitment, right? And presenting students with different talents, with advertising as being a viable source and a location for those talents. Well, I'm an artist and I draw, but I don't think I can make an income from it. Well, let's talk about becoming an art director. Well, I like to write, but I don't think I can make an income from it. Well, let's talk about copywriting, right? And that's just to the very, very basic and a 50,000 foot level, of course. And so for us, it's that. But then as we have those students, it's presenting them with the career path, examples that they can follow, but then also preparing them for the challenges that they're going to face with very often being one of the few or one of the only ones, right? The professional training part of it is an important aspect, but then also the mental health training of it can't be overlooked as well, because that's a thing, man. It's a thing. And I don't think people who are outside of minority groups ever quite get that, right? That there's something to being the only and holding up the whole standard of whatever you're the representative of. I'm the only Black, I'm the only person from the LGBTQ community. And sometimes, man, as a person from those communities, I just want to come to work and do the job, but I don't have that latitude. And so the mental health of it is also an area of training, because as I said, people leave the industry, they get excited. I'm year one and so forth and so on. And then we look up, and by year 4, year 5, year 6, they're on to something else. And when we talk to them, well, why? It's not that they couldn't do the work. It's not the professional part. It's the mental health part, man. And that is a tough road to hoe, right? Wow. It's a tough road to hoe. And so the training for that, the preparation for that, that has to be paramount as well.
Yeah, 100%. That's something that's a part of my story that I normally share with either the gifts or whenever I'm speaking at different places or whatever. I talk about the mental health part, and the reason why I bounced from the agency where I was for 13 years was the mental health part, because I felt like I was an imposter. I was suffering from imposter syndrome, a lot, even despite all the things that I had done, accolades, whatever. It didn't really matter because I felt like I was an imposter, because I never felt that I was good enough until the time when I left. And I was like, I don't need your validation, white people. I'm fucking dope as it is. And watch what I'm about to do next. And thus 100 Roses for Concrete was born, and a lot of other things. So my very last question for you is something that we actually ask our members. And that is, through your journeys in life, through academia, the military, and then academia and all that stuff, how did you rise from concrete?
You know, I thought about this question, and I think two things. One is I always feel like I was willing to do the hard thing, right? The hard thing, I was fortunate or unfortunate, fortunate to grow up in a small town in Ohio, small, largely farming community in Ohio, where being one of the only was just a fact of life. And so I was kind of prepared for that when I left and went to college, service, grad school, the whole bit. And so I was always willing to do the hard thing, to be the only, but also because I was very fortunate to have people who answered my clumsy questions, right? Because if I didn't know a thing, I would ask. And I was very fortunate in all of those areas, in the service, in college, as an undergrad, as a grad student, to ask the clumsy question, right? But for people not to shoot me down, but to actually walk me through and give me genuine answers, and also take an interest in me and present me with opportunities, and to help me through those things, to give of themselves. And so I was the very fortunate beneficiary at many steps along the way of people who were willing to do that, willing to answer my clumsy questions, my silly questions. Some might say stupid questions, but I was willing to ask them, and I was fortunate to have people who answered them and helped train me and prepare me along the way, even way back when, where this, I said my project that became Madison Avenue and the Color Line started. The professor that I talked to about that, he said, well, I don't think there are resources to write a dissertation on that topic, but I'll help you look. Right. We'll get funding for you to go places where we think there might be some resources that could help you do that. So I wound up in North Carolina or Wisconsin or Chicago. So I was fortunate to have family support along the way. My wife is wonderful support to me today. So that all of that, people, man, ultimately what it comes down to is other people helped my rise.
Absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. And that's a question that all of the 100 Roses from Concrete have to answer in order to finish their application. It's the very last question on the application, and we're going to keep it there. So right now, before we go to the Q&A, first, everyone unmute your mics and give Brother Chambers a big round of applause for his time. But now I'm going to open it up for about 5 Q&A questions. So if anyone wants to just unmute their mic, say who they are, whether they're a GIF or they're a GIF mentor, or they're just a part of 100 Roses from Concrete. And if they do have a title on 100 Roses from Concrete, just say who you are, what you do, and ask your question away. Or was it that spicy that no one has a question?
Hey, this is Karen. I'm wondering if it wasn't that spicy to ask a question. Like, I don't think there's fear. What I saw kind of from the chat, myself included, was either the articulation of what people have been feeling or thinking, or the reminder that things are cyclical, or the validation around thought. I think what one of the big things that Jason brought to the table, with the data, with the facts, with the context around them, is something that's kind of going to put the batteries in the back of people again, because so many of us are, once again, tired, right? And that's one of the things that I wanted to thank the brother from the Ohio State University, for doing. By the way, I kind of I kind of caught that before you said that. I was like, oh, Kenny's gonna get got for that one.
Oh
But
yeah, got to do it. Got to get him.
but it's just like some of the stuff is even hard for me to articulate just because there's so many things that are in my head again now. Dealing with the people, like, literally had a workshop today with a company that I advise. Literally some new work that I got. We're going through this kind of talk with a client. And it's just, you sit down and talk with them and you're saying, okay, here are the things you need to do. And they're like, oh, well, maybe do. And on one side with the client, because I'm kind of new to that team and I don't just want to just bring the plunger with the dynamite quite yet, but I have it ready to go. I'm just like, is this what I'm seeing again? And then the people on my team are like, yeah, how the hell do we get out of this? Because if they're not going to be real, then we don't even want to waste our time with them. Yeah, they want to pay us, but either they want to pay us to do the work or they need to leave us alone. And then with the company that I advise, where I can just be me and be like, yeah, no, that doesn't make any sense. If you want to do this thing, then you need to do these things. And hearing someone else say that, and hearing someone else who has the ability and empowerment to say that, is something I think that people are trying to kind of absorb right now too. It's like there was just so much. It's like, yep. So the questions might take a little bit of while to come up after you get past the agreement of all the things that you said.
Yeah, and sometimes it's reaching either a point in your life or a point in your career where you feel like you have either the ability, the personal confidence, the strength, or the just don't give up to say, because it can be hard as somebody that's either new to the industry or somebody that's new to advertising, or somebody that's young, somebody that's trying to, man, I got to keep this job because the lights got to stay on, so I recognize that because I had to go through it myself as a younger person. I'm 50 now, but I wasn't always 50, right? And so it's reaching and coming to that point, but also giving yourself the encouragement to get there as soon as possible, right? Because as we know, talent doesn't always win out, but it's supposed to. But I do believe talented people can find it, ultimately can find a place where they can be comfortable, at least as long as and they can stay a place long enough to keep the lights on, so to speak, right? And food coming in. But it's a hard thing, and that's why I always try to emphasize the mental health, the mental health part of it, because that's the part that that kind of keeps you sane and can keep you coming back and can help a person stick in this industry.
Do you think? Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I have a question. So first and foremost, thank you. Secondly, Gary, yes, I think the articulation of the struggle, it sparked something. So being that, I think that your ability to have a step back through the historian lens, it's really interesting. I think a lot of us here, we appreciate and we understand, like history rhymes, right? So inside of that, I think that this generation has been almost tasked to break all these generational curses. A lot of us are like literally trying to break, these just historical norms. So being that history repeats itself, have you found any clues as to how to break those cycles because of the history that you have studied? I'm just kind of thinking about solution and forward movement. You have gone back, 100, 20 years of this industry. Just kind of curious, have you found any clues of like what helps break cycles and just go past and beyond?
I think every cycle moves the ball forward, right? I think the thing, for example, if I think about the group of people that I studied in Chicago, Madison Avenue, New York has long been considered kind of at least the theoretical home of the advertising industry, right? We talk about Madison Avenue as a euphemism, right? Well, for the African-American advertising community, it's Chicago, right? Very much more so than New York. And so one of the things that I learned and I gleaned from that group of people, and I've talked to dozens of them, is that they spent time, man. They said, we just used to have an organization where all the Black people in the city who wanted to come, man, we would just come and we would commiserate. In other words, what they were talking about is they were maintaining community, and they found that strength, even though they're all at ultimately competing agencies in a lot of ways, but they found that strength in that community. And I think that, you have that through organizations like 100 Roses from Concrete, and it can be maintained, right? It can be maintained without that need for physicality. It can be maintained outside of a restaurant gathering. It can be maintained via social media pages and groups and organizations and conversations and video chats and those kinds of things. And so I think that with that comes strength, right? Because sometimes what can help lift us is the recognition that what I just experienced at this day on the job, it wasn't just me. Somebody else experienced it, and I can learn from their experience, and I can learn from how they overcame it and got through it. And so this generation's ability to maintain that and build from that is greater than it's ever been. And so that's the thing that has to be maintained for mental health, maintained for organizational strength, maintained from pushing that ball forward. Because in the past, when that ball has been moved forward, it's come through that group effort, that group presence, that group pressure. And that, I think, is the thing to be maintained and expanded upon in our own time.
Thank you.
I've got a question. What got me it was when you talked about people who have given up and moved on, and because that really spoke to me. Because I'm 53. I was in advertising for about 25 years, and hit a roadblock. And at one point, after like my last layoff, I started looking at other options, and I took my digital background and I went into UX design. And I don't regret the decision because I enjoy the work that I'm doing, but I didn't discover it because I gave up and tried to do something else. And that's what led me there. So my question is, when we talk about this, do you think the industry is conducive where if people who did give up and they want to come back, do you think there are changes in place where that's a possibility now? Not only just come back, but actually maybe thrive in it?
I think as an industry, probably not. At individual agencies, yes. One of the unfortunate parts about the advertising industry is, in a weird way, it pats itself on the back for its pathology, right? And what I mean by that is it pats itself on the back of, well, you've got to be tough to work in this industry. Well, maybe we're just assholes, right? Maybe we're just not nice to people. Maybe we're just jerks. And that's not something to be proud of. Well, she just couldn't take it here. Well, maybe you were a jerk. Maybe she didn't like your sexual harassing comments. So as an industry, no, because it prides itself on that. Well, no. But at individual agencies, yes, individual agency cultures do allow that. And they do have that, particularly in the area that you're talking about, right? Because skill at UX design exists outside of age, it exists outside of race, it exists outside of genders, because it's a thing that people don't feel that they can just get anywhere, that they can just do themselves. So in that instance, and with areas like that, sure, I still think in certain creative areas, the emphasis is just, well, it's got young people have all, you can't be too old and be a creative. Well, no, that's not true, because that would mean creativity dies for all of us at 50. Ray Kroc found, led McDonald's into being McDonald's after he was 50, right? So if a person can do that, then they can do advertising. So at individual agencies, absolutely. As an industry, until we get past that pathology, no. But at individual agencies, yes.
That's next level.
Yeah.
I know, like, well, because that's the thing. And so then, like, there's a whole other session about just as an industry, as the entity, because then what is the responsibility of these organizations that are quote unquote the watchdogs of the industries, right? The AdFeds, the 4As, the ANAs.
Well, that's where I look to younger people. You know, different generations look at those kinds of things differently, right? That they just, the benefit of youth or being new or newer to the industry ideally leads people to say, ask questions like, well, yeah, you've always done it like that, but we don't have to do it like that. We don't have to be nasty to people, right? We don't have to be mean. I can tell you that I don't like your creative without making you feel like you're the worst person in the universe, because I can train you to make your creative better without being a jerk about it. I can train you to have a better relationship with the client without making you feel bad. But too often the pathology of the industry, based upon what prior generations experienced, leads them to want to do that to the people that are coming after. And that's the exact wrong thing. It's no different. I mentioned being in the service earlier. You know, when I went through the service, it was okay when I went through basic training, it was okay for them to put their hands on you, right? Technically it wasn't okay, but it happened, right? It doesn't have to be like that. I can train you to be in the military without that. So why don't we just get rid of that part of it and keep the training, keep the toughness, but we can get rid of that part of it. I feel the same way about those, you know, that part of this industry, that pathology that leads you to destroy people. It's just advertising, man. It's just an idea. You didn't like, okay, tell me how to make it better, right? You don't have to break me down and destroy me mentally to do that, right? That is a thing this industry could very well eject and never bring back again, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I'd love to see that too. I'd love to see that too. Anyone else have any before we roll out? All right, all right. Well, everyone, once again, unmute your mics. Give brother Jason P. Chambers from the Ohio State University a big round of applause. I cannot thank you enough for spending time with us. I think everyone, I was watching the facial expressions from everyone. I saw a lot of head nods, a lot of claps on mute. This has definitely been one of my favorite Sunnyside chats, even though all of them are pretty much amazing. We try to make them as amazing as possible. But thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule and the world being on fire at the same time, and really sharing your wealth, your great wealth of knowledge with us, because I honestly feel that's the only way we are all going to make it through this is by learning and listening, but also learning, listening. And I talk about this all the time, learning and listening and leveraging that information that we get to take it to the next level. So I am incredibly appreciative of your time and your knowledge and your talent. And to top it all off, so everybody, Madison Avenue and the Color Line, you can buy it wherever you can buy books. You can buy it on everywhere where you can buy books. You can literally find it. If you want a hard copy, digital copy, you can find it. Go out there and buy it. Spend time with it. It will definitely change your. If this conversation didn't change your perspective on shit, read the book. That's all I'm gonna say. That's all.
Well, thank you.
That's all I'm going to say. So yeah, to everybody, y'all know I love y'all like cake. Thank you so much, brother Jason. And everyone take care, be well, have a great holiday. Please be safe. And we out of here, and see y'all on the next Sunnyside chat whenever I decide to do it. I'll do it soon.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Have a great
care.
day.
All
evening.
right.
Be safe.
Bye, everybody. Bye-bye.
Good night.